Act 1, Scene 4. Quite possibly one of my favourite scenes in the entire play, because we begin to see Macbeth in a new light. We are with Duncan in his palace, who has had confirmation that Cawdor has died. He confessed his sins and showed some remorse and some regret. Macbeth and Banquo enter with Ross and Angus, and Duncan thanks them for their part in the battle. He indicates their heroism in the battle, and equally they are showing their gratitude towards Duncan. It then takes a turn when Duncan says that he's going to name his son Malcolm next in line for the throne. He says that he is going to bestow his estate upon Malcolm. And Macbeth says, "Oh, that's brilliant, that's wonderful." But actually he understands that Malcolm now stands between him and the throne. Plans are made for Duncan to dine at Macbeth's castle that evening, and Macbeth decides to ride on to tell his wife to prepare for the king's arrival. Looking more closely at the language in the scene, we begin to see the importance of this idea of fidelity. Fidelity meaning loyalty. Remember, to have fidelity means to be loyal to someone. Infidelity means you cheat on them. And we begin to see this here. So Duncan talks about the original Thane of Cawdor, the one who joined up with the Norwegian lord. And he says, "He was a gentleman in whom I built an absolute trust." This is going to be important because of the irony that comes upon later, when obviously we see Macbeth become the Thane of Cawdor and then betray that trust again. And as Banquo and Macbeth and Ross and Angus arrive, he reaches out and he says to Macbeth, "O worthiest cousin." At this point in the play, Macbeth is the absolute hero. He has gone into battle not once, but twice, and defeated them in the name of Scotland and in the name of the king. And Duncan points out that more is thy due than more than all can pay. So he feels at this point in the play, he owes so much to Macbeth for his loyalty that he can't just pay him money. It's not enough. And that's why he's given him this Thane of Cawdor. And in return, Macbeth, and you'll see here in the green, says, "The service and loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself." So Macbeth at this point in the play is showing his understanding that it is so important for him to be loyal to his king. And is building Macbeth up to be this hero, to be the person who will charge into battle no matter what it costs to defend his king. And it makes it so much worse when he goes on and betrays them. So perhaps in this bit, we're now beginning to see the turning point. We see Duncan give gratitude towards noble Banquo, talks about growing him into to be a better person. Banquo is very receptive, says, "If I can stay in your heart, I know that I'll grow into to be the hero that I can be." And then Duncan perhaps seals his own fate by saying, "We will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm, who we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland." And that's the Scottish version, really, of being the Prince of Wales. It means that you're next in line to the throne. And despite Macbeth saying he's very happy with this, and actually, you know, this is a really joyful thing, when he turns aside, so he turns away from the characters on the stage and speaks to the audience, he speaks to himself. And he says, "The Prince of Cumberland, that is the step on which I must fall down, or else owe a leap." And he recognises at this point that Malcolm is now a blocker. He's either got to give up his claim on the throne and give up on the witch's prophecies, despite the fact that they're already coming true, or he's got to find a way to overleap Malcolm. He's got to find a way to get beyond Malcolm because he now lies in his way. And then we get this really ominous, iconic line from him where he says, "Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires." And we see Macbeth now with all that ambition, with all that desire to become the king, so much so that he doesn't want light. He doesn't want God to see his black and deep desires, because he knows at this point in the play that this is wrong, that he shouldn't want to do anything about this prophecy, that he shouldn't want to do anything about becoming the king. And he understands that in order for him to obtain what he wants, to get to the kingship, to become the king, he's going to have to do something very, very wrong. And so his deep desires are black, they're dark, they are evil. And perhaps ironically, Duncan then says, Macbeth is a peerless kinsman. He's peerless. There is nobody as good or as pure as Macbeth. And we've just seen him turn to the audience and talk about how his desires are evil. So we're left, and this is why I love this section of the play, because we begin to see Macbeth's darkness come through. We begin to see that perhaps his intentions aren't as pure as he would like everybody to see. Revise this section of the play. Again, stick with that idea, draw it, imagine it, write it, analyse it. So draw your picture, create that pictogram featuring Macbeth learning that he's not next in line for the succession. What would that moment look like on stage? And remember, surround it with your quotations. That's your key to really beginning to solidify this information into your memory. Imagine it. How would you direct this scene? Where would you place the characters on the stage and why? What would you be telling them to do? How would you have Macbeth do that aside? What words would you want him to emphasize? Write it. We know, because we've read the play already, we know that he's going to write a letter to Lady Macbeth. We know that she receives it and she's halfway through reading it when we see her on the stage for the first time. But imagine what that letter would look like. Write it in a little bit more detail, telling everything that's happened to her already and thinking about how you feel about it. And then, of course, you can analyse it, your mini essay. How does Shakespeare present Macbeth as a conflicted character in this initial 4 scenes? Which aspects of his character have we already seen? Thinking about his introduction by the witches, then what the captain says about him, then his interaction with the witches when he meets them in person, and then when he learns that information for the first time about not being next in line for the succession and what that then does to him. I think there's some really interesting ideas that you can draw upon if you try to just begin to create an essay where you bring it all together.